The key issue is moisture percentage in the case of baling, and the principle behind packaging or baling the crop is to make sure that you obtain as much of the high quality material as you possibly can in the bale. And so that means maintaining the leaf-stem ratio, not losing leaves during the baling process. It also means preventing any kind of post-harvest degradation due to high moisture, which tends to be the enemy of quality post-harvest. So if you have high moisture, particularly with these big balers that we use out here in the West, the high moisture can be really a big problem, causing molds, causing the degradation of the protein, and in some cases even spontaneous combustion of hay.
When we bale hay, we are trying to dry it sufficiently that it will not mold or heat in the bale. And then it can be stored essentially forever as long as it's in a dry place. The moisture content that the bale needs to be depends on the bale size, because smaller bales we can bale a little bit wetter, around 18% moisture, and then bigger bales like the 1-ton bales need to be down around 14% moisture. And this in part is why we don't use the big bales in the Midwest and the Northeast, because we don't often get hay down to 14% moisture. So we'll go to the 3x3 bales, the half-ton bales, instead of the 1-ton bales. And then the 1-ton bales would be used in the arid western United States. Now, if we're going to bale wetter than that, then we have two options that we should consider. We can bale above the moisture levels that are appropriate for storage if we add a preservative like propionic acid. And there are systems available that measure the moisture content of the hay and then meter the amount of propionic acid. The other alternative is, particularly as we get above 30% moisture, is to take the bales and wrap them, either individually or in one long tube. And by wrapping them in plastic, we're allowing it to heat a little bit and for the bacteria to grow a little bit and use up the oxygen. And then that hay is preserved as silage in a bunker because the oxygen is not there, and mold requires oxygen to grow. We don't want mold in hay because mold affects the palatability. A lot of cattle and other animals won't eat the hay. Mold can also cause diseases in the animals, and the spores actually can be toxic even to humans under some circumstances. So we should consider moldy hay as spoiled hay. We need to be very careful and to have it dry enough if we're going to bale it, or else treat it with acid or wrap it in plastic, both from an animal and a human health standpoint. And we want to think about harvesting the leaves. The first thing, of course, is to have made the windrow when there was some amount of toughness in that hay yet, so that it would hold on to the leaves in the merging or the raking process. The second thing to keep in mind is that really the big balers do a pretty good job of picking that windrow up and making hay with minimal leaf loss. Raking is important to merge or rake the swaths together into a windrow. Oftentimes we might want multiple swaths in one windrow so that we're closer to the capacity of the baler or the chopper, and we can drive less over the field to harvest. But we have to be very careful with raking, because that can be a high leaf loss process if we're not careful. We want the leaves to have dried some, but we don't want them to be so dry that they're brittle, and then whenever that hay is moved, they fall off and they're left in the field. Remember, the leaves have the high protein content, about 30% crude protein, the stems are 6%, and the leaves have the high energy value, about 450 relative forage quality, the stems are 60. So what we tend to see happening, though, if people aren't careful, is when we cut the alfalfa, it's about 50% leaves and 50% stems. If we rake and lose a lot of leaves, and we can end up with bales of hay that are only 30% leaves and 70% stems. So obviously we've lost tonnage and we've lost quality.
A lot of growers will bale at night, and they'll bale at night because what happens is, again, back to this issue of the leaves and the stems of alfalfa will dry at different rates. And the leaves will oftentimes be tinder dry in alfalfa when the stems are not nearly dry enough. And so what the growers do is also, keep watching the stem moisture up until the point where they think that stem moisture is ready to go. And then they'll wait for the dews to come in at night. That'll soften the leaves and enable the grower to obtain a good leaf stem ratio and retain those leaves rather than having to be knocked off by the baling process. And some growers have, there are even machines available that will use artificial dew to wet, just give a small amount of moisture to soften the leaves up so that they aren't lost. You got to remember that between the night and the late morning, there's probably a 5% change in moisture percentage between that dries as the crop dries down, the windrow dries down during the early morning hours. So that's why the growers oftentimes will bale at night, because they'll have an ideal stem moisture and then they'll try to retain those leaves. Leaf retention is really the biggest challenge when it comes to baling. And we get a lot of leaf loss either during the baling process or during the raking process. Those are the two key processes by which we can lose our quality through leaf loss. So the key issues related to leaf loss during baling are moisture percentage and the conditions under which it's baled. So the moisture percentage I'm talking about is the internal moisture percentage of the stem itself, and the average moisture percentage of a bale. And growers can actually improve their situation by making sure that they bale during the time when the leaves are soft enough and are not brittle and cannot fall off during that period of time. They can also change it by improving the rate of drying of the stem material. That's the wide windrow concept, and making sure that the drying rate for stems is as rapid as possible.